Okay, here goes part two. So really, in effect, what we're trying to do is to just find individual. Think of it like they were trying to find individual overhead absorption rates for each of these bases, and then just add them all together because we just know that each driver is a base, so to speak, has a base, and then we just need to find the individual ones and then just map them all up and then add them and just segregate them or keep them, if you like, connected to the product. And then we know what all these overheads are. So let's just look at that. So I'm just looking at this. I mean, this is just a theory of it, and then we'll see an example. Step one, what are the major activities that give rise to the overheads? So we need to kind of, again, use some kind of some good judgment. So typically, and then, okay, um, determine what causes the cost, so what the cost drivers are. So these costs typically, sometimes you won't get them perfectly. So we have what we refer to as cost pools. So we put a similar, we almost argue that, okay, find all costs that are so similar, put all them all together in the same cost pool, and then assume a strong enough driver, if you like, that is causing them. Right, and that's how you think about it. And then again, like we did when we did traditional, we just now need to find out what the total of those costs are, for each of those activities, and then we now know, if you like, the total amount of the driver, so then we can calculate an absorption rate for each cost driver, right? So kind of how we did traditional base, if you like, just taking you back to traditional, we found the total overhead, which was 80,000. We found that the total driver, if you remember, were machine hours. Exactly the same thing, but this time, instead of 80,000, we have this for each of those cost pools, A, B, C, D, or whatever, and we have whatever the driver is. It might be 10 items and 10 inspections, and so we can therefore find out what the cost is per inspection, that sort of thing. That's where we're going, and then we kind of carry on. So let's look at an example. We're going to carry out with Saturn, so we can actually compare what Saturn look like using activity-based costing when we use traditional based costing. Here's the 80,000 for Saturn. So look at the question. The question is in your textbook. Let me just find the page very quickly so you can read. So pause the video, read the question, and then we will carry on. I'm just looking for the question myself so that you can look at it. This is on page 81 of your textbook. So page 81, look at that. And it carries on from the previous question where we know what the broken down costs are. So once upon a time we just had 80,000. Now we're saying that we can actually tell you what the breakup of these costs actually are. And they add up. All these machining costs, component costs, setup costs, packing costs all add up to 80,000. This is now irrelevant, this 80,000 as a figure. I'm not using it anymore. It's totally irrelevant. This is what's relevant, these four. So my business now is to find out how much of this 5,000 am I going to allocate to Sky? How much of this 15,000 am I going to allocate to Sky? How much of this 30,000 am I going to allocate to Sky? And how much of this 30,000 am I going to allocate to Sky? And exactly the same thing for Moon and for Sun. So I need a method. So I'm told that these are the drivers, if you like. You have production setups, which are probably most likely causing setup costs, number of components, which are most likely causing component costs, customer orders. Of course, the more orders you have, the more in terms of packing you will be doing. And we still have an element of machining costs, which are related to machine hours. So the first thing I need to do is, if you like, which is what I've done here, I have the number of units, I have the machine hours per unit, so I can find what the total machine hours are for Skybar. So I have 5,000. Again, just I'll click on it so you can see my formula. So that's the machine hours times the total number of units. I have the same thing here for Moon Egg and the same thing here for Sunbar, and I have the total. Then what do I now have? I also have the production setups. So you can see what I've done here is now added up all of these. So I now have the total, and because I have the total, I can now find the overhead absorption rate, which is literally saying what is a machine cost per hour, if you like, which is what I've done here. So I've done the sort of overhead absorption rate here. I'm basically telling you the 30 production setups caused £30,000. So therefore, one production setup caused £1,000. So therefore, Skybar should take three of those, and so 3,000 is allocated to Skybar, 1,000 to Moonegg, and 26,000 to Sunbar. That's what I'm ultimately trying to do, to just allocate those overheads to these guys. And so I do all of that, and you can now see that I create a table to sort of do that allocation. So I've just talked about setup costs. So those are machine costs, and you can see my formula there. If I have 0.3125, if you like, per hour, if I click on here, you can see here that I have 5,000 hours. So if I have 5,000 hours in total, and I have 0.3125 per hour, I have the multiplication of both, and that gives me that 1563. You can sort of play with that and see exactly where we're going. So now that I have all the, because now I'm dealing with all the units, right? I'm showing you what the overheads are for all those units of the 500,000 units. I have to do it that way because I'm dealing with different bases and things, so I need to do it for all of it, all the 500,000. So those machines, components, setup, and packing, right? Right, 50, uses the same thing. 50 um, orders drove a total cost of 30,000, and that's 600 really per order, per customer order. So that means that 60 per customer order, I know that's 60 times 4 here, 60 times 21, 60 times 25, right? And then you have that there for you. So now I just add them up, and that is the total production overhead for Skybar for 500,000 units. Same thing here, 8,275. I just add these up together. See, if I just do that, that adds up nicely. You can see my figure there, 8275. That's the 8275. And I can find what it is per unit by just dividing, if you like, this figure. I mean, let me just do that figure, B37 by B38, and I have these figures per unit, and I'm done. So when I say I'm done, all I have to do now is just bring these figures and insert them. I have the direct material and direct labor, never been a problem. The problem has always been this production overhead. I just come in and insert those right there, right? And then I find the full cost, if you like, per unit. And then, of course, we're selling at this price. So you can see all I've done is just use a different method to arrive at the full production cost by finding production overheads using ABC. And exactly, I now have the profit and loss using ABC. And we can see something quite critical here, especially here. I'm going to do this first. Focusing here, we can see that I've just brought I've referenced chapter 1. I brought in what the profit and loss was using traditional, and we can see that when we use traditional, we had concerns about Moonpig, but now that we're using activity based, we have a different figure. And the same thing applies here. We were apparently profitable when we were doing Sunbar using the older method, but now using the new method, we're actually making a loss. So it tells us that they're using both methods. The argument is that the ABC method is a refined method. We'll look at the slides in a second, but at least now you can compare both, and this is very common in the exam, this whole principle of comparing both methods, calculating and comparing both. Great. Again, what are the advantages? I mean, of ABC. It is an improved, more efficient cost, if you like, cost determination, determining or splitting overheads. And of course, it means that you have a better chance of getting your pricing right and the sales strategy right, or PM, or decision making. And it provides a much better insight. Of course, gradually, if you know what's driving the overheads, you have a better chance of controlling them. And ABC recognizes that overhead costs are not all related to production and sales volume, like we've just said. And because overheads is so much more significant proportion of total cost, it's really critical that we get it right. Yes, more realistic in a complex business automated environment. And we can use it for services, of course, talking about services as well. And again, like I say, where we do have volume driven items, then, or where it is not very big, where then there's no point going through the stress of becoming so detailed, because you see, like I say, you have to set up processes in place. So you can then map those, measure them, and therefore control them. Great. It's impossible to. Yes, you can't, which is why I said because you can't overhead allocate all overhead costs to specific activities. We do have the concept of cost pools, so we can go with the cost pool idea. Um, and sometimes those choices might not be right. Um, yeah, and I think it's quite complex, and you can imagine having to try to explain to people what's going on with ABC, and sometimes all those costs of laying those processes down might not be worth, if you like, the cost saving in the end. The cost saving in the end. I think that's a good place to stop for that part, and we'll carry on in part 3.